So welcome to the class of 2024 to 2026. Ah, perfect timing. Latoya,
Mhm.
perfect timing. I hope you come on camera. And and when I say
Hello, sorry,
2000,
Robert.
yeah, that's okay. It's okay. We were late, so you're perfect timing, actually.
Okay.
The I say that the class is 2024 to 2026 because we just finished a 2-year cycle where we covered everything. But sometimes people come in the middle of a cycle, and so they do this the first year during the second year. And for other people, it's just helpful to do a review because there are some topics that I go over more than once. Like I always will go over tefillah, prayer, and always go over a Shabbat, the main ones. I always try to cover them in some level every year. So that's when I say 2024 to 2026. I don't want you to think that if you've already been in this class for a year, let's say Chelsea or more, that you have to be here to 2026. Didn't want to scare anybody there. Latoya and Chelsea been. So there are, by the way, not only are there one more person who's coming. I don't know why two more people who will be signed up. I have two more people who are having their entrance interviews, as each of you have had. I don't want to call it an interview. Our entrance conversation, where I hear about them, they hear about me and about the class, and see if it seems to suit them. There have been a number of people who it didn't, I could tell from our conversation that for whatever reason, it wasn't right for them. So there are two more prospective people who may be joining this class, and I hope to meet one of them. I'm meeting tomorrow. Another one I hope to meet before next week, so that if they are part, they could join already at the beginning. So you feel a little bit left out when you're not right at the beginning. What I would love to do is to go around and have people say a little bit about themselves, so that introduce themselves, what they're doing here, if they've been in the class before or not, so that people get to know them. Latoya, are you able to come on camera? I really do prefer that. And I think for everybody, is that possible for you?
Not at the moment. In a little bit I would be, but not at the moment.
No
I'm so sorry.
problems. No, no, I understood. That's why I asked. Sometimes it can't be. I know you usually do. So we'll wait and you could introduce yourself perhaps when you're on camera so people can see your face, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
Okay, great. So I'll start. I'll introduce myself, even though people have all met me here. My name is Rabbanit Bracha Jaffe. Rabbanit is a form of rabbi that has been reclaimed by women getting smicha, which is rabbinic ordination. And I received my ordination 7 years ago. I've been working for the last 5 years at HIR, and I am the associate rabbah. Rabbah is also a female form of rabbi, and that's the position is called associate rabbah. I work very, very closely. Basically, we run everything pretty much with the senior rabbi. There's also another part-time rabbi who works full-time at the yeshiva where I got my ordination, Rabbah Sarah Hurwitz. You may have met her. So she works about part-time, about 10% of the time. She is in our rotation, but not carrying the shul in the day-to-day because she's very busy running the yeshiva. And Rabbi Avi Weiss, who started the synagogue, the shul, HIR, he also occasionally steps in, gives a sermon, he gives a class sometimes. We still feel his presence. One of my roles as associate rabbah is running the conversion course, which we call Foundations of Judaism, which I quickly shortened to FOJ just so I wouldn't have to write Foundations of Judaism every time I wrote them. That's the only reason why it's FOJ, and it makes it a little bit easier, but there's no other reason. There's no magic to it. And each of you have had a discussion with me. I love teaching the class. I love being there and accompanying people on their journey, whether they end up converting or don't end up converting. It still is an honor and a privilege. And I love having a class that feels comfortable for people to talk, where people are not shy and are comfortable and feel safe to ask questions at whatever level they are. Is always going to be a mixture of levels, because if somebody wants to join in the middle, we're not going to tell them to wait a whole year. They join and then, pick things up on the way, and sometimes repeat it the next time we go around. I find it an honor to learn with people who have chosen to join the Jewish nation or even just learn about it in depth. And we hopefully will have fun on the way and that you will be left with the feeling that I've answered your questions. That's the beginning. And then once we go around, then I'll tell you a little bit about the course and my expectations. All right. So let's start with the old timers, although Latoya is not. So, I mean, not until you get on camera, hopefully. Chelsea, why
I
don't you
can go.
introduce yourself? Yeah, thank you.
Hi, I'm Chelsea. I've been taking the FOJ classes for like 1.5 or 2 years now. But I pretty much started with like no exposure to Judaism outside of like I had a few really close friends in college, but they were conservative. So like really no exposure to Orthodoxy aside from my partner's family. But through like knowing my partner's family and them welcoming me into their traditions, I've decided to convert and learn more about an Orthodox lifestyle and what like raising an Orthodox family and having an Orthodox household means. So that's really what sparked my journey and why I signed up for the class. So
Yeah,
it's nice to meet everyone.
yeah, Chelsea's come a long way. From the one who attended and no clue. And today you're just so knowledgeable and just really, really, really lovely to see how much you've gained along the way. Jeff, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Jeff Oken. I'm actually born Jewish. However, I'm always learning. I grew up Reform in the Reform movement, but I since became more observant. And then the last few years, I met Latoya, and she's now my fiance, although maybe I was supposed to let her tell you
Woo!
that. And then so she's in the program and she wants me to be smart too. So I agreed to join with her.
Beautiful. Yes. And Jeff comes with some knowledge and sometimes is able to answer questions. But I know that, and it really is nice when both partners can come, not, it doesn't always have to be, but because you came from Reform backgrounds, for example, Chelsea's partner alone comes from an Orthodox background. So he knows all about, or a lot of it, right, Chelsea, would you say? He knows a lot of what we're learning. Yeah, yeah, he's got it. But it's very different asking him questions and learning it on your own and then asking him questions here and there to fill in. That feels very different. So we're glad you're with us.
Mm-hmm.
And your cat, of course. By the way, this is a very animal friendly. I just want you to know that we've had tons of different kinds of animals appear on screen. And even if you're allergic, that's an easy way to be animal friendly. So, Latoya, do you think you're going to come on camera soon or how long do you think? Or you're not there right now. Okay, we'll wait. We'll wait with you. So, Mariana, why don't you introduce yourself, where you live, a little bit about yourself, how you got here?
Hi, I'm Mariana. I'm originally from Ukraine, but I've been living in New York for the past 23 years, and my partner is Jewish. So basically, I met all my friends. They were also Jewish, and their families were very nice to me and very welcoming. And I grew to like and respect Jewish traditions. And after I went to Israel last year, it made me think about my relatives, because my great grandfather was Jewish too. But because I'm from Ukraine, it was forbidden at that time. I grew up not religious. And it made me think about learning more about Jewish traditions and Jewish history. But this is my
Okay.
first class.
Right. And is your partner Orthodox
He's
observant?
yeah.
And
Mhm.
have you learned and done things with him so far, or not so much?
I've learned and done things, yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. All right. James.
Hi, how's it going? Great to be here. And
Yeah.
Israel absolutely is beautiful. Having just been there in August for like 2 weeks. So
You were in Israel in August for 2 weeks?
yeah, it was
That's
absolutely
amazing. Where
amazing.
were you?
Just Tel Aviv. Yeah. Tel
That's a
Aviv and
great place to be.
Jerusalem. Yeah.
Main places, yeah. Well, we can't really go north now, and we can't really go south now, so it's a problem.
Yeah, so we just went east. And it
Yeah,
was it was a
exactly.
it was a very nice time. So yeah, this is my first class, although many attempts to try to join prior to in my journey of converting to Judaism. So I'm just excited to be a participant and eager to learn and cement more of those learnings. So thanks so much.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you, James. And you're living,
82nd.
you live in, so you live in the
Yeah,
city,
I live in the Upper West Side.
Upper West Side. And Mariana, did you say where you live?
I live in Great Neck.
Great Neck. Okay. Latoya. Hi, we're just sharing a little bit about who we are, where we are on our journey, and
Oh, perfect.
how you got here, whatever.
Yes. So, hello everyone. I'm Latoya. Um, my fiance is Jeff Oken. I would say before I even had a conversation with Robinette, Jeff was like, come with me to a Shabbat lunch. I have some friends that I like for you to meet. And they were so warm, so nice, so kind. And that's when I started to say to myself, the people are great, the food, the culture. Um, it seemed really nice, and I wanted to get more information. So that was about, I would say, a little over a year ago. Right,
Mm-hmm.
Ebony? A little about,
Yep,
yeah.
about that. You've
So
been here for about a year. Yep.
yeah, about a year. So this is now my second year. So I'm in New York City. I think that's about it. It's nice to see everyone.
Yeah. Okay, great. Terrific. Yeah. Chelsea was saying hi. I don't know if you saw that. Okay, so a little bit about the class. Some of you have been here, have heard it. I've also spoken to you when we had our discussion, but I do want to repeat it to make it clear that so let's talk about a few things. First of all, conversion with Orthodoxy is different from conversion with other denominations. I do not represent other denominations, so I don't know what their requirements are, but I can tell you what the requirements for Orthodoxy are, or what we expect. And nobody is ever forced into it. Of course, if at any point in time you feel that this is not the right conversion for you, you're still welcome to learn with us. But we totally respect that. And there have been a few people in this group who have spent time, not this particular group, but in this class, or even just over the 5 years that I've been here, who have, for various reasons, left. Some of them decided not to convert, sadly, for various reasons. Not sadly so much as the way they were treated is what made them feel that way, which I thought was very sad. And so they got bad feelings about conversion. And that's something that I hope you never have to experience. And if you do, please speak to me about it, because I that's something I feel really, really, really strongly about. And other people chose different denominations that they, like one woman said she just doesn't get the non-egalitarian part of Orthodoxy. It doesn't feel right to her. And I said, I get that, and you should definitely find a denomination that works for you. And others are still converting Orthodox, but for whatever reason, decided to go with a different course, or whatever it is, so they didn't finish with us. So all of that is totally legitimate, and no pressure to go in any direction. I just want to make that clear as well. The course started out as a 1 year course, and I discovered that 1 year isn't always enough. It's often not enough, and I felt like I was stuffing it into 1 year and trying to quick fit everything in, when often there might be weeks where you can't have a class because it's one of the Jewish holidays. Now, there are some years where there's no bumping up with Jewish holidays, so it's not a problem. But in that case, it might be a little bit less than 2 years, or we spend time learning more deeply in something. That's also possible. But it's also, so it's more like a 1.5 year course, but we do it over the course of 2 years so that we have time to go as slowly as we need to, and to delve into any questions that might come up for somebody, because questions are always, always, always welcome. If it's something we haven't at all learned yet and it requires a lot of teaching, then maybe I would say, let's wait. We're going to have a few sessions on that. If it's something that I can answer quickly or explain, I never like to leave anybody feeling uncomfortable or like they don't know what's going on. So sometimes you'll find that even though we have, clear topics for each session, I'm happy to weave in other answers, other questions, because what'll happen is that you'll hear about the same topics over and over from different directions, and eventually it'll feel more comfortable for you and more natural for you. That makes sense to people? But we are going to have a planned list. Sometimes also there may be a community event or an event from my synagogue, from my shul, from HIR, Hebrew Institute of Riverdale. Shul, by the way, in Yiddish means synagogue. And in the Ashkenazic world of Orthodoxy, that's the word used for synagogue. So whether there's rhyme or reason for it, it doesn't matter. But we generally say shul. That's not true of the Sephardic community, but I teach the Ashkenaz. I mean, that's what I know, and that's what we do. If somebody wants some information about Sephardic customs, that would be you could ask me and I could point you in that direction. But I try to teach you all the buzzwords so that you'll be comfortable. When somebody says shul and you're like, what the heck is a shul? So now you know, a shul is a synagogue, and that's what's used by Ashkenazi Orthodox communities for synagogue. Conservative usually use synagogue, and Reform usually use temple, and I don't know what Reconstructionists uses. So I can't, maybe they also use temple. I don't know, because they use more English. Whereas in Orthodoxy, because a lot of people came from Europe, some Yiddish words crept in, if that makes sense, because that's where a lot of it came from. So I want to tell you the expectations of an Orthodox conversion. Let's start with that. And I will be sending all of you, some of you have received it already, and some of you have not, but I have a document. I'm not sure, Chelsea, I ever gave it to you, or Latoya, because we spoke about it in our discussions, but I'll just send you the document to make sure you have it. It's basically everything we spoke about, meaning the tenets, the pillars of Orthodoxy, and I'll go into that in a minute. I do expect you to come to every class. Now, life bumps up, and I get that. Oh, I know what I started saying, that there are some nights when we have communal events, like we might have a class about Purim, about Pesach, and Passover, Passover, same thing. And that might tell you how to make your kitchen kosher for Pesach, for Passover. And Marianne, if there's a word you don't understand, or James, please make sure you ask me. But if there's a class like that on Zoom that we're offering at the same time or on the same night that our class meets, then obviously we're going, first of all, I'll probably be teaching that class, and I'll suggest to you, please join the class so that you'll also know how to make your kitchen kosher for Pesach. And you may not understand everything, but you can always come back to me the next class or on email and say, I didn't get everything, but it's always good to be exposed to it. Or there may be a communal gathering because of Israel Independence Day or Israel Memorial Day. Bless you. And Chelsea. And, so sometimes, this year it feels like there are a lot of Monday nights that are available, but I can't anticipate always what's going to be going forward. So as I said, it may bump up that you have something else, you're not feeling well, you're on travel, you have, I don't know, a wedding to go to, whatever reason, an affair, an event. In those cases, I expect you to watch the class, which will be recorded. Now, it's always better to be in the class because then you can ask questions. But generally, the teacher is teaching most of the time. Not all the time, but most of the time. So you'll still get the amount and the information. I mean, if it has to wait because you were too busy, that's okay. But the expectation is that you'll want to watch every class that you miss. But we do ask for you to be there for the bulk of classes so that I can also get a feel. First of all, it shows your commitment. We don't ask for money for this. There's no fee for the class, but we expect your commitment. And if you can, I appreciate it if you send me an email or a text message. I'm happy. My phone number is all over the place on the HR website. I can send it to you also an email. I'll send that when I send the next email. And I appreciate if you give me a heads up that, you won't be making it for class. Nobody's being penalized if you don't, but I appreciate it because I expect everybody to attend class. Does that make sense? You're adults, we're all adults, we can take the commitment. Gabby Taylor, who isn't here tonight, I'm not sure why, she actually works in Canada and is an hour behind us, and it runs a TV show or something. So the first hour she can't go on camera because there's a TV show happening in the background so she can't, but then she comes. So we're used to that. I'm not sure why she isn't here tonight, but she'll be here. She's been very, very consistent about her participation, and I hope that continues. Any questions so far? No questions? Okay. So next, what are the requirements for Orthodox conversion? So what separates Orthodoxy from the other denominations, I mean, there are some conservative communities that are close to Orthodoxy. A very, very major difference between Orthodoxy and conservative, that's capital conservative, capital C, because that's a denomination. And that's the one that's closest to Orthodoxy because it follows what we call halacha, which is Jewish law. The first difference that's very clear when you walk into a shul or a synagogue is that the Orthodox shuls have what's called a mechitza, which is a separation. Mechitza comes from the word chetzi, which is half and half. So it's not always physically half and half in the room, but it does divide the room into two halves, even if the halves are not perfect. By the way, in my shul, they are perfectly symmetric. If you didn't know, the men and women sit on either side. If you didn't know which side was men, which side was women, you would not know by the way it's set up. If it was empty, if you walked into the empty shul, right? Then, right, Chelsea, Latoya, Jeff? Most shuls are not like that. A lot of them are. What's it like in the Youngers of North Riverdale? Is it also like half and half or not?
Yes, it's
Yeah,
and
it's
an
also
interesting shape, but
so
mostly,
so the
yeah.
only difference there is that the podium where the leader is on the men's side, right? At the Youngers of North Riverdale. So you already would know that it's the men's side. Whereas in HIR, there's a neutral area in the middle that's either men or women could come up there. So
Right.
it's unusual and it's a really beautiful way of giving women space and giving them as much honor as you can and respect. In many, many Orthodox shuls, women's sections are smaller, often dimly lit, not always, but often, and not as welcoming for women. Not all of them, but many of them. And that's something you may come up against. And I'd be glad to hear about it if that happens. So why is there a mechitza? That's what it's called. The word is mechitza or mechitza. One of the things that I'll be sharing as I go along is the different pronunciation of words, because these words are, I'm sorry, one second. Just give me one moment, please. I apologize. Okay. Why is there a mechitza? Mechitza. So as I said, there's uh, a different pronunciations of the same word. Did somebody have a question? No. The same word is pronounced often by Americans differently from Israelis. Israelis is more modern Hebrew. So mechitza is an older European way of pronouncing it. And in Israel, they all pronounce it mechitza. Usually the accent's on the last syllable. They mean the same thing. But I want you to understand why you might hear the same word pronounced differently. A much easier one to remember is Shabbos and Shabbat. Shabbos and Shabbat are exactly the same. It's the Sabbath. But in America, with this older European pronunciation, people say good Shabbos, have a good Shabbos. In Israel, and many people now in America will say Shabbat Shalom, which means basically hello Shabbat or have a peaceful Shabbat. So I will make sure as we go along to try to teach you the different pronunciations. The reason I'm teaching you the different ones is because I don't know which community you'll be in where you'll hear one or the other. And I want to make sure that you feel comfortable when you hear that word, mechitza or mechitza. So the mechitza or mechitza, which goes down the middle or not the middle, divides the room into two sections. One of them is for men and one of them is for women. Women and men are not allowed to pray together next to each other as a rule in Orthodoxy, A. B, only men are counted towards a minyan or minyan, same word, which is 10. It's called a prayer quorum in English. I don't know if it's used anywhere else, but you need a quorum of people to have a prayer service, and those people have to be men in Orthodoxy, from bar mitzvah age and up, age 13 and up. Women, it's wonderful having women in the room. There's no problem. And in fact, any man over the number of 10, like 11, doesn't change it. 10 or 1,000 is the same thing from a prayer service point of view, as long as you have 10 men. But obviously, the room feels much more filled and joyous and beautiful well, I don't know if it's joyous, but whatever the feeling is when you have more people in the room. So I always tell the women and the men, I don't always tell them, but when it comes up that the 11th man and the women are equivalent. Neither of them add to the quorum, but they add so much to the feeling in the room. Did people get that little nuance? I think that's an important thing to say because women often feel like second-class citizens in Orthodoxy, or some do, because they're not counted towards a quorum and because they don't lead services. That's one, they don't lead services, and they're not part of what's called a Beit Din or Beis Din, same thing, Beit Din or Beis Din, and that means a rabbinical court. Now, when would you guys see a Beis Din or Beit Din? At your conversion. A Beit Din is made up of 3 men. Okay? So again, women are not counted towards these 3. Those, I would say, are the main differences, at least in modern Orthodoxy, between where men and women, where you will feel it in a more public setting, meaning that there's a machitza down the middle. You have to sit on the women's side if you're a woman. You have to sit on the men's side if you're a man. Today, there are interesting questions about people who are trans or non-binary. Where should they sit? And different shuls either do or don't have policies about this, because the halakha, the Jewish law, doesn't address the issue of trans or non-binary. We don't discuss that right now because we don't, as far as I know, we don't have anybody trans or non-binary in this group. If we did, of course, I would address it, and eventually we will talk about it. But that is a main difference between Orthodoxy and all the other denominations. Conservative as well, no machitza, there's no reason to separate because it is egalitarian, meaning that men are counted, women, as long as there are 10 men and women adults, women over age 12, boys, girls over age 12, and boys over age 13, all can be counted in conservative, reform, reconstruction, et cetera, et cetera. All the other ones, there are other denominations. And that's a major difference between Orthodoxy and other denominations. So just so you know that as at the get-go, so you understand. And that's why in many shuls, men tend to be the ones who are more learned, often, not always, certainly we used to be like that, more learned, more knowledgeable, and they're the ones who came to shul and made up the minyan, the quorum, because they're the ones both have an obligation to pray and also can make up the quorum, whereas women were not always even encouraged to come. Like, you don't have to, we don't need you, kind of thing. That's the message women got. I think at HIR, at my shul, we give a different message to the women. You're always welcome. We want you there. You add so much to the room. And within the boundaries of halakha, Jewish law, we have roles that women can play, like saying certain blessings that you don't need a quorum for, returning the Torah to the ark. We do when the men leave, go to the men's side, and only the women, things like that. You'd have to come to our shul to see it, or I can explain to you. Latoya, did you want to say something? No? Okay. Any questions still here? No, we good? Yeah, Jeff. Mariana, you're so far away. Any way to move a little closer?
Yes,
Awesome.
just I
Yeah.
have my phone. I didn't want to put my face too close.
No, it doesn't feel that way at all. Yeah,
Okay.
Jeff.
Well, I had heard an idea that I don't want to say anything bad about men, but men don't
Go for it.
necessarily focus well if they're among women, and they might
Right,
be
that was correct. That's the original idea behind it, is that there's always some sort of interest or maybe sexual tension or distraction. What? Distraction. My husband's sitting on the couch. He only hears my side of it because you're right. Is that true? You don't hear it. It's in my headset, right? Sometimes when he wants to, he loves to take part in the conversation. So distraction could be a distraction. I mean, women can be a distraction for women, and men can be a distraction for men as well. But there's more distraction and talking and maybe, I don't know, other things that can happen. And specifically, there are certain prayers where men specifically are instructed, assuming that men are more easily distracted and aroused by women than the opposite. I don't want to get into whether that's true because I don't not relevant here. I'm just talking about the Jewish law. It is based on that men would be distracted and therefore wouldn't have full focus. And that's why there's a separation. And actually, I know people who came from egalitarian settings and moved either to a different neighborhood or their friends, whatever reason, they decided to go to a shul that is Orthodox. And they said that at the beginning, it was hard for them not to sit with their spouse or maybe their children of the other gender. But after a while, they found it to be very nice, actually. I'm not trying to push it. I'm just telling you I'm just repeating what they said. They felt comfortable and warm, and it was a nice place to have a bonding moment, even though you're not supposed to be talking most of the time, but it still feels bonding to share that space with some of your friends or people who you get to meet. And it feels less distracting. So, there's things to be said for either side, but Orthodoxy has stayed very, very true to this. And if one considers oneself Orthodox, then you go to a shul that has mechitza. Now, it doesn't mean you can't attend a shul occasionally. My niece just got married and she had a wedding weekend, and they're very observant but egalitarian. They don't call themselves conservative or Orthodox. They're post-denominational. That's the new term for them. But they didn't have a mechitza, so I davened in the back, but I didn't take any roles, and it certainly wouldn't be something I would do as a rule. I was there to take part in the joyous occasion and everything, but I wasn't an active member of the davening space, the tefillah space. Although I don't actually have the prohibition. Women don't have the prohibition. It's men who have the prohibition. But moving on from there. Okay, so that would be the major difference. But the other thing is that the pillars that I'm going to say, which I've shared with each of you, you know what, Chelsea, what are the 4 pillars? Or just say one of them. And then Toya, we'll have you join in.
Okay, so definitely holidays.
Holidays and Shabbat. Great. So Shabbat and holidays have very clearly defined guidelines about what you are allowed to do according to Jewish law and what not. And the purpose of it is to create a sanctuary in time from the busy, coming at you every second, even though they didn't have technology in the days when it was set up 2,000 years ago, whenever it was, 1,500, no, probably more than 2,500 years ago, when they set up these Jewish laws. But it still creates a sanctuary, because if you're not working your fields, you have to figure out a way to milk the cows, because they would be in pain if you didn't milk them. But you're not allowed to work the fields or harvest your fields or cooking or baking. All of the day-to-day existence in our world, there's so much technology coming at us all the time. It's hard for us to put down our phone even for this class, because we're constantly getting messages and we're getting input. When we're on our computer, we're constantly distracted, and there's many things happening, and we jump in our cars or take public transportation. There are just so many ways that we use technology, and our lives are very busy that way. And Shabbat specifically is a sanctuary every week, a sanctuary in time when we rest. Now, what we rest from is creative work. All of these things that I told you have to do with creating something. It doesn't have to be in that moment. It has to be a step towards, like, there's electricity, for example, used when you answer a phone call, that kind of thing. When I mean creative work, once electricity was invented and considered not allowed on Shabbat, that was, that then became creative work. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't have a light on. A light can be on, but you have to set it from before Shabbat, or you have to have a wall clock that turns it on and off. You are not allowed to flick the switch. That's what you don't do. Oh, can't even see that one. You can't turn on. Now, I'm not talking about if there's a great need, or if somebody's not feeling well, or, we're not talking about cases like that. We're talking about in general when you have Shabbat, and we're going to learn about Shabbat again. And Yom Tovim, okay, here's a good word. Yantif, Yom Tov, Chag, holiday, all are the same thing. One is in English, one is in modern Hebrew, one is in a kind of European Yantif, as a European way of saying it, and Yom Tov. All of those mean the same thing. Those are holidays. They specifically mean, in general, biblical holidays that are defined by our Torah, which I think everybody here except for Mariana and James, like we haven't discussed it with you, so I don't know if you're familiar with it, but we will be talking a lot about biblical, right? Latoya and Chelsea, we talk about biblical as opposed to rabbinic a lot. Yeah. And so that's, and then the Shabbat comes every week, but the holidays each have a specific feeling to it, specific mitzvot, commandments, mitzvahs, commandments that you're supposed to do that make it special and give it a very specific ambiance. If on Pesach, Passover, you eat matzah and other kinds of foods, and you have a seder night, which is long and interesting and a kind of balagan, how do you say that? And it's a what? Ballyhoo? Okay, ballyhoo. I don't know what that means, but it's different from just a regular meal. And if you have all sorts of other things that you do, then on Sukkot, when we sit in these booths outside, and on Rosh Hashanah, when we hear the shofar being blown, shofar, same thing. It's about to come up, by the way, next week. So every holiday has its own specialness, and we will be learning about them. And the main difference between the holidays, biblical, and Shabbat is that whereas on Shabbat, you're not allowed to do any cooking or baking, and we'll learn what that means not to do cooking or baking. In addition to what you imagine cooking and baking is, there are extra definitions. On Chag, holidays, you're not allowed to do everything you don't do on Shabbat, we don't do, except for cooking and baking, because there's an extra special mitzvah commandment to be joyous. And that is connected to food. Because we all know how much fun it is to eat food, good food. So you're not allowed to turn on the oven. You're not allowed to strike a match. But and we can tell you how to, like if you have a candle already on, then you can just pass the fire, the flame to the match. You can't strike it because that would be creative, but you can pass it and then light your gas fire if you want to. Electric is more complicated. And you can cook something. You can make, people often have barbecues on Yom Tov if there's time, because it's fun and there's time to get together and it's fresh and delicious. Not me, because I don't have a backyard, but other people. I'm happy to be invited to a barbecue. That works really well for me. Now, Chelsea is vegetarian or vegan, one of them, right? Vegetarian?
I'm pescatarian, so I eat a lot of
Pescatarian.
vegetarian food.
Right, pescatarian. Yeah. So pescatarians maybe do barbecues less. I don't know, because vegetable are yummy. And yeah, and salmon, I guess, yeah, yummy too. So so Shabbat and Chag, did we get I'm just giving you a little taste of what it is, just a teeny overview, not going into detail. We're going to have sessions on that. So that was one of the main pillars. Now, the other denominations, there are people in conservative communities who keep Shabbat. There are people in egalitarian, like in the community where my niece is, where they're egalitarian, they keep Shabbat, they're observant. The big difference is that they're also egalitarian. So there are some, but most people who are outside of Orthodoxy, the majority do not, as a rule, keep the halacha of Shabbat. They might light candles and have a meal together, which is awesome, but they don't keep Shabbat according to Jewish law. Latoya, what's another pillar? Remember, I always like to talk about 4 pillars. What's another pillar of Orthodoxy?
I believe the mikvah.
Oh, yes. So that's family purity laws. Mikvah is a body of water. It's collected like rainwater. It's special laws associated. And that is between a heterosexual couple, man and a woman. When the woman gets her period, she enters a state of spiritual uncleanliness. And about a week after her period is finished, she goes to the mikvah, to this body of water. And it's not like a lake. I mean, you can go in a lake, but we have it inside a building. It's heated and clean. So don't worry about that. And then, so there are all sorts of laws going along with that. And during the time of Nida, that's the word used, there's no, it's forbidden to have sexual intercourse. And we try to refrain from sexual touch because that leads to sex, as it should. So that's a whole area. And then after a woman has the baby, then she also, while she's still bleeding, is considered to be spiritually unclean. Oh, I don't like unclean. Spiritually, what? Impure. Thank you. See, I got my research assistant sitting on the couch. She helps me. Spiritually impure. And I give one session on that. And then when I have couples who are going to get married, I sit with them separately and have their own sessions with me because it's a little, it's first of all, it's not always relevant to everybody in the group anyway. And, or even Orthodox Jews generally don't learn it till they get married because they don't need it until then. So there's just no reason to learn it. So I spend time with each one separately. For those getting married, there are actually 2 engaged couples in this Zoom room. Just saying. Okay. And another one, Gabby and her partner are also planning to get married. We have 3 couples in our group. It's so nice. But you haven't met Gabby yet. Yes, it's really lovely. Okay, so that's the second pillar. Jeff.
Kashrut.
Kashrut. Kashrut is the Hebrew word, kashrut actually, but in America you would say kashrus or kashrut, but it comes like kosher. People have heard of the word kosher. That's not it. Have you heard, Mariana? Have you heard of the word kosher?
Yeah.
Yeah, so what does it mean to you, kosher? Just asking,
Um,
curious.
It's food that was blessed by the rabbi or cooked
Mm-hmm.
or prepared in a different way.
Mm-hmm. So first of all, no blessing by the rabbi. That has nothing, just so you know, rabbis don't bless food. It's just not our thing. It is not, maybe that's a Christian thing, but it's not a Jewish thing. So it has nothing to do with that, just so you know.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure where you heard that. Maybe somebody taught you that or you heard that once. No blessing. Now we do the 4th pillar, which I haven't gotten to yet, has to do with saying prayers and blessings, but that's not the rabbi doing it. That's everybody does it. Every time I take,
Mhm.
I have a whole bowl full of apples, so I usually eat at least an apple a day. If I take an apple, I have to make a blessing in front of it. That's not because I'm a rabbi. Everybody has to do it. But it's
Oh,
not blessed.
rabbis.
It's not that it doesn't make it kosher. This apple is kosher no matter what. It is inherently kosher. So it doesn't change its status of being kosher. It's just that we always say, you offer a teeny little prayer to God saying, please allow me to partake of your food, basically. I mean, when we learn the blessings, you'll learn what the actual words are. So it's not being blessed by a rabbi. So just we'll make that clear. In fact, one of our sessions will be, what does a rabbi do? I think we've done that before, but we'll see if that's this year or next year. But it is about different foods. So it's some foods are inherently kosher. Some foods are never kosher. Some foods have to be separated like milk and meat for it to be kosher. If you ever put cheese or dairy on something, meat or chicken, it's done. You can't eat it. That becomes unkosher. There are animals that are not kosher, so no matter what you do, you could never eat any part of them. Seafood is inherently unkosher, but all fruits and vegetables are naturally kosher, for example.
Mhm.
Okay, was that
Yeah.
just as an overview, Mariana? There's much more to be said about it, but did that give you any clarity or not
I
really?
understand. I just somehow thought always that the rabbis are making a blessing on the kosher.
First of all, what?
Maybe just be the rabbinic oversight on like
Wait, 1 second. I'm hearing 2
purchased food.
things. 1 second. Martin, what do you want to say?
You need to make a distinction between seafood and fish.
Oh, okay, fine. Yes.
Those-
Okay, thank you. Martin is pointing out that there is fish that is kosher, but not what's called seafood, which I thought seafood only referred to crab and shrimp and things like that, but maybe I'm wrong. So
And
there
I
are
know
certain
that
fish.
monkfish.
It's what?
I read like last week that monkfish is not kosher.
I don't know. I don't know. I'm not such a fish eater, so I eat tuna. That's the most, a little salmon, not that. Sometimes I eat fish, but I'm not that familiar. But the seafood that I was talking about are things like shrimp and crab and lobster and oysters,
Okay.
clams, scallops. Those are things that are not kosher. Shellfish. Oh, shellfish. And then there are fish that are, we'll learn about that. Okay, thank you, Martin. Now, back to what you were saying, Chelsea, please, about the blessing, where you think that came from.
Oh, I was saying instead of like blessings, Mariana, you might be thinking of like the rabbinic oversight for like food that you buy at a store, like where it has like, you know, the kosher U and the kosher K.
Yeah,
Did
that's
you
So it's
mean
not like
like that it
blessed, but
has, you
mm-hmm.
mean like it has a symbol on it?
Yeah, like you.
yeah.
Ah, thank you, Chelsea. That makes
Sorry.
sense because I was thinking, how would rabbis get to all the food to bless it anyway? No, so that has nothing to do with blessing. They kind of give their blessing, but just by saying this is kosher. Like they go into factories and they check that all the food is kosher that goes into it, that the process that's being done uses only kosher ingredients. So that they don't bless it, but they give their signature, their stamp that it's
Yeah, like
kosher.
you sign.
Either are you, there are many of them, many, and I will share them with you, which ones are okay by us, which ones people do it. But let's say if it's conservative rabbis, we usually don't consider that because they might interpret Jewish law differently from Orthodoxy, for example. Or so we'll talk about it. But thank you for clarifying, Chelsea. That was very helpful. Does that make sense to you, Mariana?
Yeah, it makes sense. Thanks.
Great, 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 great. Perfect. So now we get to the fourth tenet, the fourth pillar, which is prayer and blessings, which is very, very, very much a part of Orthodox Jewish life. And I don't want you to think you have to spend all day in prayer or all day in blessing. So let's start with blessings over food. We eat and drink pretty much all day long. I mean, we may do it only 2 or 3 times a day. I get that. But it's rare to go through a day without eating or drinking, except on a Jewish fast day, which we have a few of them coming up. But every time you take, not every time you take a bite, but every time you take an item of food, an apple, a fruit, a cookie, a cracker, a sandwich, a drink, we drink all day, coffee, tea, water, juice, soda. Most of us drink all day. You make a special blessing, and the blessing gives you a moment to pause, to think about what you're doing, and imbues it with more meaning. That doesn't mean that every time you take an apple, you think of meaning. I mean, it's almost impossible to live your life that way, but it gives you an opportunity to stop, to thank God, basically by saying, blessed are you, Lord, who created the apple. Basically, that's what we're saying. It's acknowledging that it's not us, that there is a force behind this world that is constantly keeping it going. Now, in addition to that, there are prayers, which are said 3 times a day, and on holidays and Shabbat, there's more. There's also reading of our Torah, which we might get to today a little bit. I hope I'll get to it a little bit. And that's really challenging because you're stepping into a world where it's in Hebrew. That's what makes it so very, very challenging. Because even if they were long, and even if they were unfamiliar, and even if you didn't know the tunes, but if everything was in English, you could find your place. You'd be able to follow along. And it's really hard to do that when it's in Hebrew. And I want to acknowledge that and give it space and just give you permission to find it hard. But even though it's hard, it's a way to connect. That's really important because in an Orthodox community, a lot of it centers around the shul. The community center around the shul, the classes, the prayer spaces, Shabbat when we're not driving in cars. It's all about your local community. We don't drive in cars. We don't pick up the phone. We don't watch TV, computer. We don't do any of that. I'm not talking about if there's a health problem. For a health problem, you can do anything pretty much. I mean, a real issue, a medical issue. But the point is to be with your community, and a lot of that time is spent in shul. So that doesn't mean that tomorrow I expect you, to go to shul and pray 3 times a day. It's just too hard. But eventually, I really recommend that you learn Hebrew so you can start to follow along. It would be a lifelong learning, 100%. But I highly recommend, there are many different ways of learning Hebrew. We've tried to offer different things in this class. Chelsea finally found something that felt good to you, right? And different people find, sometimes something pops into my inbox and I share it with the class. Do you want to share, Chelsea, what you found?
I was just gonna say Duolingo is actually pretty good. Like I felt like it's been really helpful for me.
Great. Duolingo, it's called. Duolingo. Latoya, I don't know if you also have been doing Hebrew, right? Am I right about that?
Yes, I believe there was what you call that kind of class where it's a quick class. They run through it about a
Yes.
month or maybe 6 weeks, and you get all the letters. It was really helpful. It was really good.
Right. Now
But
you
it's a
need to
lot
take
crammed into
it's a lot.
crash courses. That's what it's
Oh,
called, the crash
course.
courses.
But
Yes,
then you have
yes.
to use it, not to forget it,
But
and
then
to
you have
learn
to
how
use
to
it not to forget it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Duolingo is you have a recommendation right here. It doesn't mean you have to do it tomorrow, but at some point, I mean, you can convert with us if you don't know Hebrew, but we really don't recommend it. And especially for those who hope to have families, you want to be able to connect with your children when they, I mean, we expect people to bring up their children. They don't necessarily have to go to, I don't know, SAR day school, but they have to go to some place that has Jewish content and they're brought up Jewishly and learn about and if your home is anyway going to be an Orthodox observant home, then you want them to be with other kids like that, and you want to be able to converse with them when they come home from school, at least at the minimum to read. You know, at some point they may surpass you, but or not, I don't know, but you don't want to feel so left out. So I think it's really, really, really important to put it on your list of something to do. Start at least during the time of your conversion journey, and then you get up to wherever you get up to. Like if you can read the blessings in Hebrew, that's great. If you can read the main like, verses of the prayer service, that's great. Things like that. Okay? Got that a little bit? Okay. And because you'll be part of an Orthodox community and we don't drive on Shabbat, therefore you must be part of an Orthodox community wherever you live. You have to, at least around the time of, by the time of your conversion, or, you know, if it's going to be afterwards, or you're connected, but your plans have to be to live in an Orthodox community. We don't expect, even people who are Orthodox their whole lives, it's really unusual for them not to live in an Orthodox community because they want to go to shul, they want to connect. You need kosher food, you need to have other Orthodox people around you, and you wouldn't want to live by yourself. You wouldn't be able to fill and fulfill a fully Orthodox lifestyle just by yourself. And for somebody on the path to conversion who doesn't have the background, that's really hard. And that's what keeps you going. And then people invite you, you invite them, you make connections, and you create community. So we would expect anybody going through conversion to live. Now, I want to say, let's say about Latoya, who at first was coming to, ooh, that's spooky, who was first coming to our shul, to HIR, but it was a really long walk for her. And we talked about it, and we found a shul that's very welcoming, that's much nearer to her. And that's great too. We don't have an issue. Obviously, people don't even live in our neighborhood. Can't expect you to come to our shul. And we've had people from different parts, like the woman in Canada. We had somebody who converted with us from, what's it called in Texas? What's it called?
Houston.
Not Houston. Austin, not Houston. Yeah. And so obviously they didn't come to our shul. They actually came to New York to do the conversion, which was awesome. And then I married them, which was really awesome. And then they went back. They actually had a baby before, so the baby also got converted, which was really beautiful as well. Now there's, for men, so what is the actual conversion process? The actual conversion process, when you're ready and we prepare you and, you know, make sure that your belief system feels sound and that you're comfortable and you're living an basically you're living an Orthodox lifestyle before you cross over the line to become Jewish. So women and men, both, the last step is immersing in a mikveh, that same body of water. Now, the Beit Din, remember I told you the rabbinical court is 3 men. So for men, they can stand in the room because you have to go in without any clothing on. But for women, first of all, there are women in the room so that the woman in the water feels protected. And also she has like a cloak over her. So you can't actually see. It still feels vulnerable, which is why we make sure there are women in the room so the woman in the water doesn't feel uncomfortable. And the men are only allowed to see that it's the top of her head and hear the splash, and then we close the door. It's only open a crack. I don't love this part, but there's nothing I can do about it. That's like the minimum. Open a crack, see the person's head, hear the questions. Usually I ask the questions. You know, do you believe? Are you going to accept the mitzvot, et cetera, et cetera? And then afterwards close the door, and then she can take off the cloak and immerse in front of women as opposed to in front of men. A man also has to go through circumcision before. Women don't have circumcision. So sorry about that, guys. Now, if a man has gone through medical circumcision already, they don't have to do it again. They have like a pinprick of blood, and I'm told, I'm sorry, I don't know, but the guy who does it, who is wonderful, and he said, it's really not painful. So that's for a man, and that's for a woman.
Do you guarantee?
Questions? Yes.
Do you
James, go. What?
guarantee that? Do you
I
guarantee?
guarantee that I will connect you to our wonderful Mohel and let him guarantee. Sorry. I don't know if he went through it himself. It is on the penis. Sorry. I'm sure it's not, best, but he said it really isn't. It's really, really fast. Like he's like so happy when an adult man comes and doesn't have to have the whole circumcision. So, there's a pinprick. You have to have a pinprick with making a special blessing. And, anyway, that's it. 2-step process. It's just the way it is. To be continued in another conversation. And you're not there yet, but if and when you get there, believe me, we'll figure out whatever has to be done and make it the best it can be. That's the best. That's what I can tell you. How are we doing so far? Does it feel like a lot of information? Do you feel like it makes sense? I know for those who have heard this before, it's not the first time, Mariana and James, it might feel like a lot.
No, it makes sense. It's very
Makes
easy.
sense.
It's
It's
easy to
logical.
understand. Yeah, it's logical.
Okay, good.
Thank
I come from a computer background, so I like to do things logically. That makes sense. I'm just going to get myself a drink because my throat got dry. So I'll be right back. Okay, so I'm going to tell you, I'm going to make the blessing right now. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol niya bidvaro.
Amen.
Thank you. People say amen or amen after somebody makes a blessing. Okay. The other thing I do need to tell you is that I teach a lot of the classes, but not all the classes. We have a Maharat, that's the yeshiva. Does everybody know what a yeshiva is? It's a school of Jewish study. Sometimes it's to become a rabbi, to get rabbinic ordination. Sometimes it's just to learn. Yeshiva, the word yeshiva or yeshiva means to sit, literally, because you're sitting and studying. So the yeshiva that I went to, which is called Yeshivat Maharat, there's a third-year student who taught last year as well. Her name is Hannah. She will be teaching some of the classes, and she's also on a fellowship, an internship or something, I don't know what. So she's not able to teach all the classes she was supposed to teach. So we have a second-year male student from the men's yeshiva. I went to women's yeshiva. Excuse me, we have kind of a sister and brother yeshiva. They were both started by Rabbi Weiss. It's called Chovevei Torah. He's wonderful. He's an intern at our shul this year. I like him a lot. His name is Josh, and he's delighted and excited to be teaching some of the classes. So it will be some of us, and it'll always be recorded, so you can still watch it afterwards. And as a matter of fact, if one of them come on and don't remember to record, please remind them. You do want it recorded, and you're allowed to say, wait, did you record? Okay. Or I might put it on automatic recording. That's another possibility. So Josh and Hannah will also be teaching this class, each time a specific topic. But as I said, you're always feel comfortable asking questions. If they don't feel qualified for the answer or don't know the answer, as I may not know the answer immediately, then we'll get back to you and we'll bring it up. And I want to say I'm always happy to answer questions by email, but I also, and I'm fine with that, but I also want to tell you that often when you have a question, it'll interest everybody and it will spark a conversation. I think Chelsea and Latoya, we've discovered that. Sometimes half the class would end up being on that topic because I think it's just as important to ask random questions because wherever you're struggling, so sometimes if you're struggling with a very specific issue, then we'll just make a time to talk outside of class. But if it's a general, something to do with Judaism in general, I think it's really important to bring the question here. And the other thing I ask after a certain amount of time has passed by is we pause and we go around and everybody says, well, what are you feeling good about? Where do you have questions? What would you like to hear about? And I have added classes to the curriculum that were not there before because it came from questions of people in the group. Like, for example, one of them was what gives rabbinic authority? Another one is what's with all the different dress? How do people dress so differently? What's with the different hair coverings? What's with, just to understand it, where it comes from, what the culture is. We also spend time on life cycles. That's a big deal. Obviously, life cycles happen in everybody's life. But in Judaism, there's a lot of rituals associated with it. That's something we'll spend time on as well. We are going to introduce more about Jewish history and Jewish philosophy. So that might be nice for Latoya and Chelsea, who have spent time on the customs and rituals and commandments. And we'll be a little bit more about that. Okay. Yeah, and okay, so I wanted to give you just something of an overview of Judaism. I don't know if you know about it. Judaism began, so I want to give you really of our library, not so much a timeline. One second. Oh, here, I have the book right here. This one particular one is called the Keter Crown Bible. That happens to be named. This particular one has Hebrew and English. Everybody see that? Hebrew on one side, English on the other. This happens to be a very good one because it's based on excavations, archaeological discoveries that were found in Egypt in something called the Cairo Geniza, where they discovered amazing fragments of scrolls and letters that were used, I don't know how many hundreds of years ago, and it actually taught them a lot about the Hebrew language and things about the Torah. But this is what I wanted to tell you, leave you with this thought today. This is called a Tanakh. Anybody here know what a Tanakh is? It's okay if you don't, just curious. Jeff, do you know what it is?
Tanakh is the compilation of the three major types of books for the Old Testament,
Perfect.
the Torah, the
So one
Prophets.
second, wait, I have to stop. We don't call it an Old Testament because we don't have a new one. So we will never call it the Old Testament. When you don't have a new one, there is only one. So I just want to make sure we don't use that terminology.
Okay.
Yes. So you're saying the Bible, the Torah, yeah. And then the prophets, it's called, and then the writings.
Right.
That's what Ketuvim. Very good. So Tanakh is actually an acronym in Hebrew. Tanakh. Everybody get that? Tanakh. And it means Torah, Nevi'im as prophets, and Ketuvim, Chanukah are interchangeable here. Again, you have to learn Hebrew language to know that. And it means the writings. So the Torah part, anybody hear of something called the 5 books of Moses? Does that ring a bell anywhere? Mariana, does that mean anything to you?
I read somewhere, maybe in Jewish literacy.
Oh, yeah, good. So that's something for you to look up again. So I just want to show you how much here we go. Of this whole book, this part is Torah. Do you see how much smaller it is than everything else?
Mm-hmm.
But this is what we in Orthodoxy believe is God-given. That this was literally dictated by God and given to Moshe, on Mount Sinai. And there are probably movies you can watch that would help you with I always tell people to watch Prince of Egypt to learn about Moses, for example. It's a cartoon, but it's actually quite sweet. And I think the 10 Commandments, but I've never seen the 10 Commandments. It is good. My husband says you should watch the 10 Commandments to give you, no, but it has to be true to our history. If it talks about Old Testament and New Testament and Jesus, it's not going to be very helpful. But if it's about the story of Moshe, which is the Hebrew word, Moshe, Moses, they're all the same, just a different way of saying it, one in Hebrew and English. So we believe that this is divine, that this is biblical, and the commandments given to us here, we believe were by God. I just want to make that really clear. Does that make sense, Latoya and Chelsea? If I ever say anything that doesn't make so much sense, okay. So what's the difference? I'm going to ask Chelsea and Latoya to think about if you know how to articulate this. Because if you don't, that's fine. We're going to be explaining it anyway. But what is the difference between biblical and rabbinic? Do you remember? I know we've discussed it many times. What would you say, Chelsea? Yeah.
Biblical would be like a biblical mitzvah would be something that literally is in the Torah.
Is literally in the Torah,
whereas rabbinic, whereas rabbinic would be like decisions that were made by the rabbis since about what their interpretations of like things in the Torah would mean, or like extrapolated.
Right. So that's a little tricky, actually. I'll say, let me say it in an easier way, because this is actually a very important distinction for people to understand. First of all, everybody has to understand that the highest, the most severe, the most holy, the commandments they were most careful about are biblical commandments. What's an example of a biblical commandment? Yeah.
Like listening to the
Benching.
shofar
Oh,
on. Oh,
What did you say, Latoya? Shofar. What did you say, Latoya?
I was saying benching. I thought benching the blessings after
Oh, yes,
meal.
that is. Oh, very good. Whoa, you girls are awesome. Okay, so wait, so let's take them one by one. So you said shofar. The only biblical mitzvah we have on Rosh Hashanah, ding, you get all the points, is hearing the shofar. Do, 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 do. Anybody heard that? Marianne, have you ever heard?
Heard that, yeah.
Cool. It is
Mhm.
the only biblical mitzvah that we are required to do. Not dipping apples in honey, but you can do that. Not going to shul and davening, tefillah, prayer. That is a parts of it are biblical, but all the other things we say are rabbinic. And I'm actually going to explain this because this is a little bit complicated and nuanced, okay? But yes, blowing the shofar is actually hearing. Not everybody blows their own. My husband knows how to blow
I heard
shofar
last week somebody was practicing last
every
week.
day except for Shabbat during the month leading up to Rosh Hashanah. Somebody also does it in the morning prayers to kind of get us ready and wake us up. There are many reasons for shofar. So that's a great example of a biblical mitzvah. Also, keeping Shabbat is biblical. Also, keeping the biblical holidays. But here's an example of rabbinic. That's a little easier to follow, Chelsea, even though what you said is important, but I'm going to go into that. The holidays of Hanukkah and Purim. Are you familiar with them, James? Hanukkah, we light the candles. Purim, what do? Do you remember?
We dress. We get
We
to
dress up.
up.
Yeah. And we hear the Megillah. So one second, they can't be biblical. Why can they not possibly be biblical?
That I do not know.
Okay, Chelsea?
are they commemorating events that happened after the Torah was written?
Exactly. Because the Torah only, it stops here. It stops before the Jews who left Egypt, which again, you have to read about that. And then they went through 40 years in the desert. It doesn't matter. There's much more in here, but we're not going to go into that right now. And then it stops. But Hanukkah and Purim happens in these pages. So how could they possibly be written here? I mean, the Torah isn't just a history book. It has laws, it has stories, it has our history, but it doesn't have it like a history book. It doesn't have it with the dates, and it tells you about our history, but only what God considered important for us to know about history. But like, well, it tells us a lot about this person, tells nothing about this person's brother, for example, because it's whatever was interesting, whatever God felt we should learn. So Hanukkah and Purim are rabbinic holidays by definition because they happened in these years. Everybody get that? Do you understand when I'm saying that? Okay. I haven't even told you what this is yet, but I will. Now, what Chelsea was saying is a little more complicated because it's not exact, it's true what you're saying that rabbis interpret and that, but here's the thing. It says in the Torah it doesn't say how to keep kosher. It just says you have to keep kosher. And it doesn't even say that. It actually says you may not boil a baby goat in its mother's milk. That's it. So wait a minute. How did we get from there to separating milk and meat to only certain animals are kosher? So there are other places in the Torah that tells us which animals are kosher. But there's nowhere in the Torah where it tells you exactly how to slaughter the animal and kosher, make it kosher. So the rabbis, and that'll speak to which rabbis, when did they do it? We can't cover everything in the first session, but let's just say the rabbis with the capital R who we trust, they said, I always say they had like a subcommittee and they sat and they thought, well, how do we do this? They look in the Torah, they use all sorts of linguistic tools to understand what's written there. It's really cool, actually. These tools are really cool. It's really analyzing the Torah from a very almost scientific, you could say, except that it's, laws of language as opposed to necessarily laws of biology. And they came up with work clothes that they put. Same thing with Shabbat. There are many things we're not allowed to do on Shabbat, but all it says in the Torah really is keep Shabbat. It doesn't really say much more than that. It might say a little more, not much. How do we get from there to no baking, no plowing, no this, no shearing, no planting, no cooking, no whatever, carrying? That's a whole other thing. Because there were subcommittees who said, wait a minute, we have to interpret the laws. So those laws, Chelsea, when they interpret biblical law, those are still considered biblical. Because according to the Torah, the rabbis, and again, which are the rabbis, and that's complicated, whichever rabbis are mandated that they're allowed to interpret, they have the power of biblical law. Because if I turned on the oven and baked something on Shabbat, I'm transgressing a biblical law, even though it doesn't say anywhere in the Torah, do not bake on Shabbat. You see what I mean?
Mhm.
But what the rabbis did that's rabbinic, and often you have to figure out, wait, is this biblical or rabbinic? And that's where often rabbis step in because we just did more learning than other people, hopefully. And so we say, wait a minute, in certain circumstances, you can do this because it's not biblical, it's rabbinic. Because remember what I said, the most severe, the most important are biblical. There's actually a middle level, which we're not going to talk about, but then comes rabbinic, and then comes custom. There's custom, which sometimes custom actually turns into law amazingly because it's so strong. But when it's just custom, it's just custom. So there are different levels of what you must do. You really should do this, and we do, but in special circumstances, better to break a rabbinic law than to break a biblical law. Does that make sense? That's a good way of looking at it. If you need a workaround for you're not feeling well, COVID, the situation in Israel, whatever, somebody's not feeling well, let's find ways to do a workaround which works around and breaks rabbinic law as opposed to biblical law. I'm not saying if somebody needs anything medical to be safe, to be alive, to be healthy, break any law. That's not important. I'm talking about not in cases where your life is literally in danger right now, then you don't play games. So there are levels of rabbinic law, and it's not always so simple to know which one is which. And you can ask me, or you ask, your partner if your partner knows, because there's certain things people grow up with and they just kind of know how to do it. And sometimes people just get it wrong. We all do. I get it wrong too, sometimes. We all get it wrong sometimes. So that's the Torah, and this is really important. We read it every week in shul. Every week we read a portion. On holidays, we read the portion having to do with the holiday, because that's also in here. That's how we know we have to do them. We read a portion from the next part and show that the Torah is important. And the Torah, even though it's so small, really, there's so much to learn from it. Every year you come around to the same passage, because once a year we go through the whole thing and come back to the beginning. And we're coming up to that. It's going to be in 2-3 weeks. I guess about 3 weeks. We're going to finish the end. And then I don't know if you've ever seen a Torah scroll, but then we lift it, turn it around, and roll it back to the beginning and start from Genesis, from the first one. The 5 books of Moses, that's what it's called. Why is it called of Moses? Anybody know? Why is it called the 5 books of Moshe, I did hint to it before. What did Moshe have to do with these 5 books? Anybody know? Well, that's what yeah, go on, James. Did you have
I
a
was
thought?
say it was God gave it to Moses.
Exactly. God gave it to Moshe, to Moses, on Har Sinai, on Mount Sinai. So on Mount Sinai, when you first got it with the flashing and the thunder and the lightning and everything else that was happening, he got the beginning of them, but then he went up for 40 days. That's what our history tells us. That's what our Torah tells us, and received the rest of it to be continued. But yes, that's why, and it's divided into 5 books. We're on the almost penultimate portion of the last book, which will be finished very soon. The rest of it are prophets, history, writings like the scrolls that we read on certain holidays, the scroll of Esther on Purim, the scroll of Eicha on Tisha B'Av, which is a very sad day, which we just had in the summer. It has Psalms. You've heard of Psalms written by King David, yeah? Psalm 27, the Lord is my shepherd. Is that 27?
Yep, I shall not want.
24? 23.
24? Oh, it's 23, sorry. We're reading 20, yeah, thank you. We're reading 27 now in this month all the way through. I knew it wasn't 27, thank you. So there's 150 Psalms that are also in this book, because written by a Jewish king, King David, our first king. There's history, prophets, kings are in here, again, part of our history. Blah, 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 blah. The story of Job, not a fun story to read. And what else is in here? And Chronicles, which is the end of it. Chronicles, that's when you get all the way to the end, which is it's a summary of some of the history that's in here. There's a lot to read in here.
Job's a great story to read, Rabbanit.
Oh, of course it is. What was I talking about? And you should teach it to me, Latoya, and I really mean that. All right. questions, thoughts, reflections. I'd love to hear Mariana and James to hear your reflections after hearing of an hour and a quarter, an hour and 20 minutes of
It
information.
was very helpful. And as you said, that you were very organized, everything was very smooth and laid out in order. It was easy for me to understand. I mean, I
Great,
didn't
great.
know some of the things, obviously.
Right, right. And the idea of these classes, they're not going to give you enough information, but they're going to give you sparks of information for you to take afterwards and then look up things that you have questions about or interested you. There's so much to learn. It's impossible to learn it in a year and a half, 2 years. You just can't. You'd have to stop working and just spend all your time doing that, which is not reasonable for most people and would probably get overwhelming. So you want to learn about it, how to do it, what to do, what the special words are, what the special customs are. I want you to feel comfortable in Orthodox settings. So I speak, we did some lifestyles. Is that true, Chelsea and Latoya? I think we did some lifestyle. Yeah, that'll probably be the second year, some of those lifestyles. I think that's usually my second year that I teach that. But for sure, we will end up talking about holidays, Shabbat, keeping kosher, and here and there we will intersperse with prayer, which arguably really is the hardest thing. But at the very least, I want to tell you about prayer, what to expect in a prayer service. Now, next week, Chana is coming, and she will be talking to you about Rosh Hashanah. Chelsea, Latoya, and Jeff have seen my source sheets. You'll be getting, most times we have a source sheet that goes along with it. The source sheet we'll try to send it out ahead of time so you know the topic. It's again meant to be just touch points about the main topics. And sometimes even as we're talking, another issue comes up and I add it to the source sheet. I try to make a source sheet readable, easy, accessible. I try to make it a little more accessible than just dry reading. And so that you'll remember it in an easier way. There's just so much information. So next week it'll be about Rosh Hashanah. So she'll talk to you about Rosh Hashanah, about the customs of Rosh Hashanah, about the rituals on Rosh Hashanah. And we'll see if she may get to more. It depends on how long it takes her to get through that. Because Rosh Hashanah is coming up next weekend. That's why. Now, yeah, I think she may start on Yom Kippur as well, because just to give you a heads up on the schedule, we have a bunch of holidays coming up. So that's what she's going to be teaching you about. Rosh Hashanah, followed by Yom Kippur, followed by Sukkot, followed by Shmini Atzeret Simchat Torah, which is the 1-year anniversary of the Hamas invasion and kidnapping of the hostages and killing many people, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a very joyous day usually, and we're all struggling with how do we keep it joyous and commemorating it. Will we allow them to redefine what this holiday means? We don't want that to happen, obviously. So anyway, all those holidays are coming up. There's so much to know about them. So she will be spending 2 sessions, I think, on all those holidays. I'm not sure if right. 1 second. We meet Mondays. I don't know about the session in between Yom Kippur and Sukkot. We'll see. She and I will be in discussion, and she'll also ask you if, I don't know if you guys are traveling to family, or Chelsea, what are you doing? Oh, you're going away on Sukkot? Is that what you said? Yeah.
Yeah.
So you might not be around the Monday before Sukkot. I could imagine that. So there may be 2 sessions before the holidays, there may be 3. We'll see. And maybe on Sukkot itself, if it makes sense, but I'm not sure I'll have time because I don't know what events are happening in the shul to sit in a sukkah and actually, teach you a little bit from a sukkah. But I can't promise you right now that'll happen because sometimes things come up. And you'll get emails. Watch your email inbox.
Perfect.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Be well. Feel free to reach out with questions, thoughts, reflections.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Have a
Pleasure.
good night,
you.
everyone.
Bye, Good night.
Bye. Good
Bye.
night.
Shana Tova.
Nice meeting
Shana
everybody.
Tova.